1, 2, 3.
Hello and welcome to the Narc Alert, the channel where we look at YouTubers and others to see if they demonstrate any traits that fall within the spectrum of narcissistic personality disorder or NPD. These videos are for fun and entertainment purposes only, strictly my opinion, and remember, please don't send any snark to our possible narcs. So key points to remember: messy fun and not a diagnosis. Welcome back, my lovely alerts, and thank you for joining me once again. In tonight's video, we're going to take a look at Tony Alamo. Tony was born Bernie Lazar Hoffman to a Jewish family in 1934. He aspired to be a pop singer in Hollywood in the 1960s and worked under the names of Mark Hoffman and Marcus Obad, and owned various small record labels. Tony met Susan, who was born Edith Opal Horn, in Hollywood, where she had moved in an attempt to become an actress. She was previously twice married and had a daughter. She had become an evangelist before she met Tony, and after divorcing their respective spouses, Tony and Susan married in 1966 in a ceremony in Las Vegas. They legally changed their names to Tony Alamo and Susan Alamo. After both he and Susan converted to Christianity, they established the Music Square Church and began a Hollywood street ministry, preaching especially to drug addicts, alcoholics, and prostitutes. Their ministry was part of the Jesus People movement, in which many people involved in the counterculture of the 60s began proclaiming a spiritual transformation and an allegiance to Jesus. They lived communally. The church quickly bought several businesses and established a compound in nearby Saugus. Members worked at an Alamo-owned business and turned over much of their salaries to the church.
A streetcar named Heaven moves through Charles Manson country north of Los Angeles, carrying a load full of joy and baffling belief. The Jesus Church, from the Susan and Tony Alamo Christian Foundation. Their commune's main source of income's received when a convert sells his earthly goods and hands in the money.
How do you support yourselves? I mean, admittedly, that when people come to join you, they give you all their worldly goods. I suppose
No, most of them don't have a thing. Most of them don't have a thing. I'll make a deal with you. Every hippie that comes to the church with money and possessions, I'll put salt and pepper on him and eat them if you'll eat the other ones. Would you do that? Most of them don't even have shoes on their feet.
Given all the free labor, the church quickly became a financial empire, while members were scavenging for food and reserving water by not flushing toilets. One of the most profitable businesses was the handmade denim jackets.
Goodies created by the Alamo Foundation. Jackets sold for between $100 to well over $1,000.
We do very well with him. He has a really fine product. I may not agree with the politics of the situation, but the product's really good.
They became hugely popular and were worn by all kinds of celebrities. An article in the paper described the jackets. To complete one of the flashy fashions takes anywhere from 2 to 12 hours, depending on the amount of beading and painting involved. Each jacket is cut without a seam, acid washed, painted by hand, and then lavishly embroidered with twinkling Austrian crystals, sequins, and such. What the article failed to mention is the work was done by children in a sweatshop environment, because their small hands could place the stones quicker. One of the strangest incidents surrounding Tony had to do with the death of Susan Alamo, who died of cancer on April 8, 1982.
I got the mausoleum. Susie's going to be buried, and I believe that he can raise her up out of the ground or out of the mausoleum.
Tony quickly predicted that she would be resurrected, and he kept her embalmed body on display at the Arkansas compound for about 6 months before placing it in a mausoleum. Before a federal raid in February 1991, Alamo ordered his followers to flee the compound and to bring the body of Susan with them. a judge ordered Alamo to return the body in 1995. On July 1998, after a 3-year legal battle, his followers brought the body to a funeral home. Tony was frequently married after Susan, and the relationships were often difficult and controversial. Following Susan's death, rumors spread that he had taken 2 15-year-old girls as wives. On June 23, 1984, he married Swedish native Brigitta Gyllenhammar in Las Vegas, but the marriage ended 2 years later. She claimed that Alamo wanted her to have plastic surgery to look like Susan, and that he regularly beat and drugged her. After many reports of child abuse, on March 25, 1988, sheriff's deputies raided California compound in order to reunite 3 boys with their natural fathers. The men had been members of the compound but had been excommunicated. In September 1994, Alamo was sentenced by the Federal District Court for the Western District of Tennessee to 6 years for the tax evasion charges, and he was later released in 1998. Tony quickly resumed his status as the head of now smaller Tony Alamo Christian Ministries. He was heard on radio stations in the U.S. and more, in Africa, Sri Lanka, and the Philippines.
Right now, let's pray, Father, that you will anoint me, that whatever it is that you want said in this message today, that it will be, that you will pipe it through me.
He claimed that the government's actions against him were merely the machinations of Satan, and his followers continued to attract controversy for distributing his printed literature. In 2007, the ministry was listed as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center on account of its anti-Catholic rhetoric. In 2008, state and federal officials raided Alamo's compound after a 2-year investigation into allegations of child abuse and child pornography. In September, Tony Alamo himself was arrested on a federal warrant charging him with violating the Mann Act, a federal statute enacted to stop the trafficking of women or girls across state lines. At the end of the trial that included several women testifying that they had been sexually abused by Tony Alamo, some having been forced to become his wives as young as 8 years old, he was found guilty on July 24, 2009, on 10 counts of taking underage girls across state lines for sex. On November 13th, he was sentenced to 175 years in prison and was fined $250,000. Tony Alamo passed away in 2017. It is hard to source a lot of interviews with Tony, so we're going to look at a few short clips to see if Tony may demonstrate traits similar to traits of NPD.
The evangelical church has been called a cult by critics. Alamo denies all charges and blames the U.S. government and the Catholic Church for selling his name, Julie.
All right, Courtney Keeley, thank you very much. Let's get both sides to the story. Now, again, Tony Alamo says that the feds are just trying to harass him. Well, I want to talk to him himself about the raid and the allegations, and he joins us on the phone right now. Tony Alamo is on the phone with us. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Okay, Tony, why don't you tell us, why do you think the feds are trying to harass you, and why would they accuse you of take 6 children from your compound?
Because this is what I've accused the federal government of and the Vatican, and they definitely are guilty of homosexuality with and preteen boys and girls, and they're also involved in turning our little children on in public schools and letting them have sex and providing condoms and birth control for them, and so they're firing back.
People with traits of NPD do not like to take responsibility for their actions. Narcissistic defenses include denial, distortion, and projection. He is clearly engaging in all 3.
Is the most ridiculous. I mean, they've charged me with all sorts of things down through the years, right, and I've beaten all of them.
Tony did not escape all charges. He was charged in 1976 for labor violations. He lost the case and the appeal. He was convicted of filing false income tax returns, and he soon thereafter declared bankruptcy.
They said I was to kidnap a federal judge and I'd beat that case.
Tony, I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want to ask you, isn't it true that you were accused in the past of polygamy, and that for those at home who aren't sure what that means, it means including marrying young girls that are younger than the age of consent, marrying them to older men that eventually would want to have sex?
That isn't true. Polygamy is in the Bible, and it's condoned by God. Now, if you weasels have got a complaint about God, you go to him and talk to him about that. I just preach the Bible, and
right, but marrying a minor is not necessarily something that you would say God would condone, right?
I never married any minor.
A classic technique used by narcissists when they argue is lie, deny, and change definitions. He did not technically marry these underage girls, but there were many of them living as wives in his house.
Polygamous compounds, as you know, do marry children that are underage, and a lot of child takes part in that. I mean, that is a fact. You have to admit that that does go on in this country, and God's got nothing to do with that.
Well, God does have something to do. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. The Bible states that the legal age for marriage is at puberty. I'm not married to any teenage girls who don't want to be. I'm 74 years old.
I don't remember reading that in the Bible, sir, and I went to Bible class every Sunday school, and I don't remember saying anything about it. I mean, kids are reaching puberty at the age of 12.
You don't know anything about the...
This seems like the deflect and attack technique. If you bring up something that they find to be untrue and problematic, instead of addressing it or taking responsibility for it, people with NPD will quickly deflect and go into attack mode. They will use their toxic tactics to quickly shift attention from themselves and bring up something about you.
So you're telling me that people that are 12 years old should be able to marry a 40-year-old, and that's okay?
What do you say?
You're saying that it's okay for a 12-year-old to marry a 40-year-old as long as she has reached puberty?
In the Bible, if you read the book of Jasher, you'll see that Rebecca was 10 years old when she married Isaac was 40 years old.
I know, but that's not the law today, and we don't see 10-year-olds getting married. Let's face it.
The law of God never changed.
10-year-olds shouldn't be married, let's just say that, and they should be waiting a lot longer before they spend the rest of their lives with an adult.
Hey,
all right.
Listen, you just talk. You want to interview me, or you just want to yap your stupid mouth off?
All right.
Translated from Narcanese, I am very important. Why are you wasting time talking when it is all about me?
Tony, you know what? I'm not going to call you any names, but we are going to have to let you go.
Pastor Tony Alamo is on the line, and he joins us right now. Sir, I take it you are in California, not in Texarkana?
That's right.
Okay, what do you make of these allegations? We're hearing allegations of child coming from your ministries, and that federal investigators have been raiding this place all day.
It's as crazy as the allegations against Jesus.
You have to have a great deal of ego to compare yourself to Jesus over child charges.
74 years old. I've never been into pornography, never will be, and it's just another one of the false charges. They've hurled hundreds of false charges against me. They said I had a tunnel and that I was holding slaves down there and that we had guns, and we've never had guns before. It just goes on, the things that they've said about me. What the government is trying to do is tarnish every real church, real Christian, born-again Christian church.
Everything he accuses the government of doing to him, he has been doing to the Catholic Church. People with traits of NPD are victims and claim to be persecuted when they make mistakes.
Okay, well, I have to ask you this. I mean, when you don't get federal investigators and dozens of them speaking to children and raiding places without some sort of evidence that they believe is there. So why would they just make up these allegations against you, Mr. Alamo?
Well, why did they make up allegations against Jesus and nail him to the cross?
He truly thinks he is Christ-like.
They will not find any pornography there. There is none. There never was any. And there's child or child or anything like that. They're barking up the wrong tree this time.
Okay, let me ask you, do you have been in trouble before? We're looking at video now of you in handcuffs. What you have been a controversial figure with this church in California and also in Arkansas. When people look at this, they're going to say, this person has been in trouble before, but you yourself have not been charged in any of this now.
Right, but what they did is they railroaded me on that one charge. IRS, they've charged me with 100 different things, including trying to kidnap a federal judge.
Tony had made a death threat against U.S. District Judge Morris Arnold. He was charged and later acquitted. An acquittal signifies that a prosecutor failed to prove his or her case beyond a reasonable doubt, not that a defendant is innocent.
Morris Arnold, and I won that case. The whole jury knew I was not guilty.
Again, he did not win the case. The charges were acquitted.
But they let a lot of people out of prison to testify falsely against me so that they could railroad me into prison on the IRS charge. And I just figured, well, you know, the Lord said these things would happen to us, and they are. They've been going on ever since I've been born again of the Spirit 44 years ago.
Okay, I got to ask you, Mr. Alamo, have you spoken to investigators at all?
I talked to people. They didn't even ask to talk to me.
You have not been interviewed by investigators?
No, because they've been interviewing a lot of the little girls over there and their mothers and everything, and they're coming up with nothing.
Today here in Texarkana, jurors heard from two witnesses, former members of the Tony Alamo Ministries. One of those witnesses was 30-year-old Jeanette Orlando. She told the jury that she was forced to marry Tony Alamo at the age of 15, and that is when the two began having. The first day of witness testimony brought out raw emotions from Orlando as she recounted her teenage years as Alamo's wife and her efforts to leave the ministry. She testified that Alamo had several underage wives, including an 8-year-old. At the heart of the case, Orlando told the jury she traveled with Alamo to Tennessee in 1994, and there the two had
N-O-T-H-I-N-G. And they never will come up with anything.
Tony Alamo, we appreciate you joining us tonight here on CNN. We know that you're in California.
Well, lucky for California, this one is dead. So, Tony Alamo. If you want to know more, check out the documentary series called Ministry of Evil. It's a good one. Thanks so much for joining me. Hey, can you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button. It means the world to me. We will be back tomorrow with some Vlogmas and a live at 5 Retro Amber Alert. I look forward to seeing you. Until then, have a great weekend and hasta luego.